Hello, hello, and welcome to Journey to SEA 2024. Thank you so much for joining me live. For those of you who are here, for those of you who are looking at the recording, thank you so much for taking your time to find out more about reports, narratives, and comprehension. So we're covering all three. And for those of you who are new, this is the first live that you're seeing. My name is Shellyan Edwards Barron, and I'm a creative writing specialist. What I do is to focus on something called multisensory learning. And multisensory learning allows students who are having challenges, who may be struggling with understanding the writing, the comprehension, and all those things, to really get into the details and find multiple ways to engage with the information. And when that happens, they really do get to understand and be able to write a little bit better. So today's session, and I remembered today to change the intro, so the title is correct, right? And in today's session, let's see, we are covering, we usually start with the reports, so let me check the reports first. Today we're looking at report prompts and writing that first paragraph. And for the narratives, we're looking at introductions and hooks. And for the comprehension, we're touching on nonfiction comprehension texts. All right. And so, what I'll be doing is to be sharing some information with you about each of those, some little tips that you could work on. And certainly, if you have the materials that I'm sharing, then you'd be able to take the tips and practice with your child. All right, so let us start. Oh, before I begin, I'm extra smiley and bubbly today because this morning when I woke up and I got myself together, got to my desk and opened, started checking messages, I got a message from a parent that made me smile from ear to ear. And I asked for permission to share, but I don't think she's online right now. She sent it kind of late last night. So I'm just gonna share one little piece of it. Not gonna tell you who it is or anything, but one little piece because the first line, this is what kind of really got me. And it really helps to know that what I'm sharing is useful because it makes me know that I'm spending my time and the effort to really help, which is the agenda, right? So the first, when I got up, I saw good night because yes, she sent it last night. Good night. We just started using the booklets and I'm already amazed. In the first page, you clarified a lot of my daughter's questions. And that is the whole point of creating those materials and really putting in the effort to I update ever so often and check in and then doing these lives. The whole point is really to make sure that questions are answered and students really have what they need to do well. So I'm pretty stoked about that today. So I'm going to be smiling from ear to ear whole day today, even though I didn't get much sleep last night and I have a million things to do as usual. I don't know about you guys, but teachers get anxious about the exam too, right? Because I get invested in my students and I really, really want them to do well. So I'm always reading and creating stuff to help. So yeah, so that's where I am this morning. But let's get into the reports, right? So, because I have a few things to share and I don't want to go over 12 today because like I said, I still have some outstanding things to send out. So I want to give you as much as I can in the compact time and then move on. So let's go to the reports, right? So we're starting with the reports. We're looking at the prompts and first paragraph. So I'm kind of hesitating because I'm looking for the 2022 and 2019 creative writing sheets because those are the last times we had um, reports tested. So let me see if I can I do both? No, I'll have to do it like this. All right, because I want to show you something with the prompts. I know there's a little tiny, let me see if I could get it just a little bit bigger so that you could see it because I want to point out something to you with the prompts so that you can really maximize the time that you're spending with your students or your child getting the report writing clear. So in looking at the prompts, now we have done the prompt analysis before. So if you missed that discussion, I think you can check the last discussion where I went into it into some detail as well. And previous discussions, you can go through the archive and see which ones deal with analyzing prompts, because that's always the place to start. Make sure that your child or your students really can analyze prompts to know exactly how to respond. But today I want to show you something a little bit different in terms of the types of prompts and the types of questions that that students would have to answer. And so when I do the prompt analysis and the different types of prompts, I traditionally focus on five. There's a sixth one, which is the natural disasters, because I think that deserves its own kind of category. But I don't think natural disasters is one that would really be a major issue. So I generally just focus on the five: incidents, accidents, competitions, events, and activities. And so while we only have two past papers to work with, we can learn a few things from these past papers that would help us really pay attention to the kind of effort and where we need to put our effort. So we're pretty much to the end of January. It's already crunch time. So you really have to look at strategies now to maximize the time that you use and get the most out of it. So here's what I noticed. Now, ever so often, I go back to these when I'm creating prompts for my students. I go back to them and I study them to see, okay, patterns and what I need to understand and so on. And here's what I noticed the last time I studied these. I noticed three things. One is that both of these exams kind of follow a similar format in terms of the kinds of prompts that are used. And I'll show you what I mean. So this one, three students were playing with a ball and light bulb broke. They're calling it an incident, and that's because SEA does not make a distinction between incidents and accidents. They're all on the same level, incidents and accidents. I make a distinction to help students really get to the details, because in an accident, things are not done on purpose. There isn't often punishment because it's an accident, and there may be different outcomes. With an incident, these things are done deliberately, and therefore there might be punishments and so on. And, so accidents generally have reprimands, incidents, reprimands, and punishments. And so I make that distinction. But of course, in the specifics of what the word incident means, SEA does not make a distinction. So they use it interchangeably. Now, this one is an incident, and I'm looking at this side here, which is the 2019 paper. So we have an incident. Well, this would be an accident, right? So accident, incident, because they're similar in terms of structure. Then we have a tour, which is under an activity. And then we have a function, which is an event. That would be classified an event. And then if we go over here, which is the 2022, that's the second time reports were done. Here we have someone addressing a school, which comes under events. Then we have taking care of vegetable garden, which would be an activity. And then here we have someone hurting their wrist, which could come under either incident or accident, depending on how you choose to spin the report. So you can say if the injury was as a result of somebody doing something, negligence, because they said slipped, but slipped why and how, you can decide accident or incident. But in any case, if we go with what it looks on the surface, it's an accident. So then, in comparing the two, what have we found out so far? Both of them have an accident slash incident report. Both of them have an activity report, and both of them have an event report. So if it is you are concerned about the time that you have left and you have so much to cover in terms of reports, if it feels like it's overwhelming, then here is where you're using strategy and focusing on the styles and types that would give you the best results. In which case, rather than doing the 5 or 6, focus on incidents and accidents, events, and activities. So immediately you reduce your workload, and now you can really start drilling and paying attention to those. So, yes, competition reports are quite likely, but if you study 4, then you are definitely going to have at least 2 of the prompts to refer to, and your child would be able to have a choice, because you really want them to choose and be able to make a decision about what works best for them. And if the paper comes exactly like these two have come, then they would have choice of all 3, because what are we seeing? Incidents and accidents. And in these cases, I'm seeing accidents really, so nobody was pushed. The prompt didn't say that, and the students didn't set out to break the light bulb. So these are really accidents labeled as incidents in the paper. So pay attention to those. Make sure if your child does not know all of the different types, at least cover the incidents, accidents, events, and activities. Right? So that's the first thing that I noticed when I studied it in more detail. The second thing that I noticed is that with the activities, and this one here is the activity for 2019. Um, what is it? This one here is a um event, and this one here is the activity for the 2022. But I want you to notice something. This line, places visited and what was learnt. Here, what was learnt from the visit. So there is going to be at least one prompt that is going to ask about what was learnt. And so making sure that your child understands how to answer and respond to this, what was learned, without making it personal and without making it informal, that is going to be an important skill to teach. All right. And this is the actual exam that I'm showing you. Well, okay, now I typed it over, and last time I did that, I had some typos. I think I fixed all of them, but I typed it over so it's more readable, right? But these are the prompts that came. And so by studying these, we notice things that can help us prepare best for the exam. And so far, we've noticed a sort of focus on certain types of prompts. And we've noticed that there's a section that I have not really seen these in many practice tests. And this is something that you really ought to check on, because a child who doesn't know what to do when they see they have to express what was learned is going to end up in some trouble with this conclusion. So, and this one as well, what was learned. How do you do that? So let me give you two quick tips to um be able to answer that. So one is using reported speech. And reported speech has to do with reporting what someone said. And so expressing what was learned, you can say things like uh at the end of tour, the tour guide um, asked questions and about what was learned, and students replied. And so you can give maybe one or two students giving answers what was learned, and then they might get some tokens for answering correctly or something like that. That is one way to introduce what was learned. The other way to introduce what was learned, like in this one, you can still do the same thing with the tokens and, the medical professional asking afterward. Um, or, excuse me, you can have somebody doing what they call, when they do like a vote of thanks at the end of an event. Sometimes students are asked to do things like that, and in their thank you, they can say, we learned, thank you for the presentation, thank you for your time, um, and teaching us about, you know, and you give 2, 3 points, and that's a way to introduce what was learned at the end of a presentation like this one. So those are two ways that you could introduce and practice, including what was learned at the end of a tour and at the end of a presentation without saying, I learned, because you don't want that personalized kind of response. Because notice the question did not say what you learned. Even though the prompt said a medical professional visited your school and addressed your class, write a report to your teacher, but it did not say what you learned from the visit. And that means you need to be objective and not say, I learned. So you have to say, the class learned. And how do we know what the class learned? We can have someone come up at the end and say, thank you, Mr. So and so, or Dr. Whoever. We appreciate, and you're putting all of that in reported speech, right? So reported speech here, reported speech here. Um, and okay, so I said two tips, but what I meant really was, there's a tip for the field trip, and then there's a tip for the event. And so that's how you could include lesson learned, but definitely include it and practice this so that students would know how to respond effectively. So, all right, so there were three things that I noticed when I studied it. So the first one was the similarity in the type of prompts. The second one was the fact that we have this lesson learned in both of them. And the third one had to do with, um, I don't want to say it's a trick, but it is something that students would really have to pay attention to, where the prompt begins as if it's going to be one type of prompt, and then it switches to something else. So, and both of them are in number 3. So if you look at number 3 over here, what we're seeing is you attended a function where you received a prize for a poster competition. We have the word competition in it. And I think this year, which was the first year I believe reports were tested, many students got tricked by this. So it's not technically a trick, but they're really checking analysis and critical thinking here so that you know that you're responding effectively. So we have attended a function, but it's about a competition. Now, what are you writing on? You're writing on the function. So this is not a competition report. This is an event report because a function is an event. And so there's a lot of reminders about function. So the word is used over and over. Students who did not know what the function word meant could have also had some issues. but we have two mentions. We have function and competition in the same prompt. So you really have to pay attention to which one you're writing on, which would be the function. This is an event report. Look at this one, number 3. During a field trip to a local tourist attraction. So we have field trip mentioned. And I know lots of students, they practice and practice field trip report. And if a student is not careful, they would look at this and say, oh, they're writing about the field trip. But that is not what this report is about. A student slipped and hurt his or her wrist. Write a report to your principal about the incident. You're not writing about the field trip. You are writing about the incident. And so you're writing an incident slash accident report. And what might happen is that a student would see field trip and spend the first 2 paragraphs talking about the field trip and then going to the incident maybe in paragraph 3 or even 4. They might spend the first 3 paragraphs talking about the field trip, what they did, where they went, and all those things. And then somewhere near the end, this child got injured. That's going to cost marks because the main focus of this report is an incident. And so by studying the past papers and making these connections, what is happening is that you're learning more and more about how the prompts are presented and how best to respond. So, just to recap with reports, when it comes to um, dealing with the prompt and the first paragraph, because here's what's going to happen. In the first paragraph, you have to mention what the report is about. So in this case, the report is about um, an incident where a light bulb was broken. This one is a community tour. This one is a function. This one would be an incident during a field trip. This one here would be an activity with a garden, and so on. So students have to practice now, sort of I don't want to say it's not rephrasing, it's not refining, kind of like consolidating, summarizing. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, you just saw that whole thought process, but um, summarizing what is happening in the report and what's the main point of the report into a phrase that they can use. And I've mentioned to you before that I advocate a 3 sentence introduction. And those of you who have a copy of the 5 reports challenge, you would see a breakdown for each type of report, what that introduction looks like, what that 3 sentence introduction looks like, and samples of reports that follow more or less that 3 sentence introduction so you can see what it looks like. So you will get to see what that 3 sentence introduction looks like for incidents, accidents, competitions, events, activities, um, and natural disasters, because you really want to get a certain tone coming straight out and right at the, right out the gate with reports, and that happens with what you put in your first sentence. So with narratives, we talk about hooks, and with reports, we can talk about that summary sentence. And the summary sentence does not have to be a lengthy sentence. I break up the summary. So the whole introduction of a report is a summary, right? And that summary is broken into 3 parts. And the first part summarizes I would say, the main ideas. Time, specific time, to me, is a detail. Date is more of an idea because you're talking about the whole day, um, and the month and the year, but the actual specific time is more of a detail. So I recommend putting the time in a second sentence. Um, so a summary sentence would be like, let's say for this one, um, you give the date, or you can start with 3 students of and then the name the school, and then you can probably say Ooh, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. This one is an incident. So, three students of whatever school were involved in an incident in, which resulted in a light bulb being broken on, and then you give the date. So it could be different ways. You don't have to have the date starting all the time, on such and such. Students who have challenges, give them the simplest format, and simplest format is starting with the date. But students who are more, what's the word, more confident with their writing, you can give them the variation because it really does sound a little bit more sophisticated. Excuse me. So something like that. So yeah, I'm just kind of off the top of my head. I didn't really prepare to get into that kind of detail this morning, but that's the idea. So you start off with that summary sentence. You really, really do need to start off with that summary sentence and pay attention to how that first summary sentence is written, what kind of information is put in it, and then how you develop the rest of the introduction with the additional details that are required. And so for this week, remember, we're working with, all right, I'm going to stop sharing this now, right? Now for this week, we're working with three sessions, right? And those three sessions, so you want to get like two 20 to 30-minute sessions, and then one full hour where you would do a complete timed report. So because you're looking at prompts and first paragraphs, you want to spend like one session going over prompts and showing your child or your students how to analyze those prompts and how to look for those different things. And then the next session, you're practicing introductions. And whether you're doing the three sentence format or not, you're making sure that they understand how to get that formal tone going right from the get go with the report in that summary and make it flow effectively. And so that's what you're working on during the first two sessions. And then third session, you're spending writing that complete report, implementing these things that were discussed, selecting the appropriate prompt, um, responding, making sure you get the details, knowing which ones you want to work on, and you can give your child a prompt. Make sure with the three list of prompts that you give, one of them is about this lesson learned, um, from whatever the activity or event is, so that they can practice that. So if you want to give them three to choose from, make sure that one is included, or you can just give them the one that has that lesson learned part so that they can practice that lesson learned part. Because when you're analyzing the prompts, you will explain to them some ideas of how to do that. Um, and then you would go back to working on the rest of the report, the full thing, right? So that's your agenda. If you're following the study pattern, then that's what you're working with for reports this week, right? So I can close that off, and now let's go to the narratives. So we're doing comprehension last as usual, right? So with the narratives this week, we're looking at story introductions and hooks, and which is similar to what we did with reports, but just this is focusing on stories. So across the board, you're looking at introductions. How do you begin effectively? That's your study this week. How do you begin reports effectively? And now, how do you begin narratives effectively? And so with narratives, you really want to look at, of course, that hook, that first sentence, but there's something that students should also consider if they want to add like a little extra flair and demonstrate some additional literary devices. Flashback is an awesome introduction that really helps you solve some problems with the introduction of a narrative. So some students kind of struggle with how to begin. They don't know, even though they understand hooks and could recognize really good ones, it's still a challenge for them to create hooks for themselves. So the flashback requires you to start kind of like in the middle of the drama, right? And so the flashback means that you are starting at the highest conflict and you're expressing what's going on there and the characters' emotions and reactions. So the thing with flashback is that because it's in the height of the conflict, you already have something exciting going on. So you don't have to kind of come up with something else that requires you to figure out a different kind of hook for the introduction. You can work with exactly what the story is about and make a statement about something really intense and the drama that's happening at the height of it, right? And so when you do that, you allow students to get that excitement, express themselves effectively, and then they would go back to the beginning and lead up to the point. So you're kind of making a sort of loop. So if you are familiar with the 12-point plot development format, which is that step by step plot development that I explained, that is actually chronological order, which will give you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Flashback is actually 7 and 8. And then you go back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you meet back to 7 and 8, and then you continue 9, 10, 11, 12. So it feels like if it should be more, but it's actually less because when you meet back with 7 and 8 as you're writing, you don't have to go into a whole lot of explanation. You can just mention it that this is how you got to that point, and then you the intervention. And it makes the story really, really interesting. Readers love that kind of thing. But there's a trick with flashback. Flashback could cause you to crash and burn if you don't know how to do flashback effectively. And so here's the number one tip with flashback. So maybe I should type this in the comments so that you could see it as well. Right? So number one tip with flashback. Establish characters' emotions effectively. I'll explain what that means in a little bit as soon as I spell character properly. All right. So yeah, I'm gonna put that up. So number one tip with flashback, establish characters' emotions effectively. And so here's what that means. When you start the story, you're starting in the height of the drama, and you're not just writing that one hook sentence, height of drama, and then jumping from that to um the beginning of the story. You have to really dig in and make sure readers understand how the character feels. You have to establish the mood through how the character feels and how they what is really going on. And that is your introduction. That is your paragraph 1. The beginning of the story, when you do the flashback and the beginning of the story, that's the beginning of paragraph 2. So all of paragraph 1 needs to be spent on getting the reader's attention by describing the height of the drama and establishing how the character is reacting to this drama and how they feel about this drama. So when the readers read your introduction in a flashback, they should know, whoa, these people are in trouble and they're going to get it. They're all going to die. And they know it and they're panicking. Your readers are supposed to get exactly the feelings and so on. Now, I work with my students pretty closely, so that's sometimes easier said than done. So when I work with my students, I check in with them, I give them tips, and we practice different sentences, and I show them exactly how to work the flashback effectively. And so this is something that you can do with your child, going through it and developing it effectively. Um, so if you want to include flashback, and I think it's an awesome way to really demonstrate some writing skills, remember those two things with the flashback. So your story introduction, perfectly fine, going through the plot from 1 to 12, beginning to end. But if you want to add a little bit extra, then try out the flashback. And the flashback really is 7 and 8, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you go from there. And that's how it's developed. So it takes some practice, and it takes effective feedback for students to really master it. So telling you is the first part of it. You have to actually go through it with your students and your child to master it and practice it. But it's a good thing to look into if you're having trouble with introductions at all. And so if you haven't seen last week's episode, go back and check it, because I gave a lot more in terms of what goes into an introduction. And I did previous episodes about introductions, but as you know, with writing, it's, excuse me, practice, develop, reinforce. Practice, develop, reinforce, and then you do a loop. So you're coming back to these things. So all of what we're covering here during the next few weeks, we've already done, but we've done it, from a this is what it is kind of perspective. This time around, we're looking at let's try it and refine it, try it and refine it. So if you're following the development schedule, the revision schedule, then you want to spend one session talking about introductions, reading a few introductions, looking at those that used flashback, seeing what the flashback looks like, how it works. And then the next section, practicing a few hooks, deciding which hooks work best, and practicing with the flashback, seeing how that works. And then your third session, you're doing a full story, implementing what you practiced in the other two. Right, so that's your agenda for the narratives. And if you need a little support with that, you can get a copy of the 7 stories narrative booklets that I have. Um, it does not include specific mention of flashback, but you do get 7 sample stories. And so you're getting one science fiction, one folklore, one adventure, one, I think I did like a mystery thriller, and there's also fantasy and realistic fiction. So you're getting one sample for each of those, plus 3 prompts. So after you go through the sample and you study it, you have prompts that you can study and practice, and then you can do your full report, your full story, your full narrative on the third day. So you don't have to worry about, okay, now after I've studied this, where do I get prompts to practice with? It's all in the booklets. So if you want to get a copy of those, you can send me a message on Messenger or send me a WhatsApp. Let me put my number, 7174993. Right? That's my number. Right, 7174993. So you can get a copy if you don't already have one. If you already have a copy, then what you're looking at is you're going through the introduction. So you have 7 stories that you can review. And so you're reading introductions and you're really studying the introductions. Now, I'm the first to admit the stories are not perfect, but of course, an essay story being written in 50 minutes, during an exam, seeing the prompt for the first time is not going to be perfect in terms of storytelling, but it will be perfect for the context it is required for. And I believe the stories that I've shared are suitable to get students that 19, 20, 18 to 20. All right. So if you have the booklets, what you're doing this week with the narratives, you're studying the introductions, and you should actually also study the second paragraph, because you want to see how it transitions from the introduction to the second paragraph. So you're studying those two first paragraphs in those, and then from there you'd be able to work on the flashback, work on the hooks, and practice that. So that'll be the next session. So, first session, you're going through all the introductions. Second session, you're doing your own practice. So, we're reading and discussing first, and then we're writing. So, second session is writing, first session is reading, and then the third session, we're writing again, but this time we're writing the whole story. Second session, we're writing introductions only. We're practicing flashback. We're looking at a prompt and, practicing and so on. And then third session, 1 hour, get settled, write story, and then we review. And in the booklet series, for those who are, okay, I'm not a writer, I'm not a writing teacher, how do I review? There's a booklet on analysis and doing this grading rubric and a worksheet that you can go through and check. So you have everything that you need to really dig in and get into the information that you need. All right. And so I think that should cover it for you with the narratives. So you can get a copy of the 5 reports so that you can study that first paragraph in reports. You can get a copy of the 7 stories where you can study the introductions of stories and have prompts that you can practice. So you're getting samples, prompts, guidelines. It's a complete package. So you would have what you need if you're looking for materials. If you're not looking for materials, you have what you need already in terms of materials, then I would say implement that study schedule where 2 sessions, 1 review, one practice the unit part that you're working on, and then full essay. So students should really be writing full stories and reports every week. 1 story, 1 report every week between now and the exam. All right. And so if what the students are doing at school is already heavy, what you can do is to probably revise those and rewrite to make changes so that you're practicing, developing in addition to what is being done at school. And with that kind of systematic approach, you should be able to see some steady improvement in in your child's writing or in your student's writing. But it does take that development. So you're spending, like, I would say, 6 days a week. You don't have to write the two on the same day, 6 days a week, and you have 1 day to rest, relax. Don't think about anything pertaining to school, because our brains are like machines. And if you keep going, 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 something can happen. We really do want to pause a bit, you know, do a little check, you know, add some oil, add some, top up the fluids and all those things. Yeah, I think I took that a little too far, but you get the point that I'm making, right? Take some downtime. We all need some downtime. It's important for parents, teachers, students, everybody. We all need some downtime. So, all right, so that wraps us up for reports and narratives. So you have your plan, you have what you need to do, and if you have the resources that I've shared, you have what you can use to do what you need to do. If you don't have the resources, message me, let me know. The 7 stories costs 145, and the 5 reports cost 135, and so both of them together would be 280. Yeah. So 7 stories is 145, and you do get 7 sample stories. That's why it's called 7 stories. 7 sample stories plus, and you get, for each type, you get 3 prompts. So you get 21 prompts in that one. For the reports, you get six, even though it's called five reports, I kind of added in a sample on natural disaster afterward. So you actually are getting six um, sample reports in that one, and then 18 prompts to work with from there. So you can do that systematic. So all that I'm telling you in terms of what you're studying this week, you have everything in those documents. And the digital, so once payment is cleared, they email to you. You don't have to print all of it, only the pieces that you need, and so you can really work the schedule that way. All right. So comprehension. Now, the I haven't always been working with the comprehension, but I did a few comprehension practice sessions with a couple of students, and it really helped them. And so in December, I did some comprehension classes, and I've been really, really studying the English language arts papers where the comprehension is concerned. And so that's why I've decided to add in a little bit of comprehension practice and tips with the sessions that I'm working with these live sessions. All right, so today, let me go back to the schedule. All right. So we're looking at nonfiction. We touched on fiction last week. So if you missed that session, you can go back. These videos are archived, so you can find them on my website. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them in SEA, the Peaceful Approach. So actually, wherever you are looking at this video right now, wherever you're looking at that from, go into archives there or videos. If it's on Facebook, it'll be media and then videos, and you will find copies from the previous sessions. YouTube, you just have to scroll back and you would see all the um all the previous videos. And so I looked at the fiction texts last week. Before that, we looked at the differences between all the different texts. And prior to that, we discussed the study schedule. So, in paying attention to nonfiction texts, um, let me check and I see, and I'll tell you. I I recommend studying the past papers. Now, I know students are going to be doing practice tests and they need fresh materials to practice, but when you're looking at like the skills and what is required and how questions are going to be phrased and how much space they're given for responses and those kinds of things, you really want to pay most attention to the past papers. Because remember, the practice tests, and there's some really good ones on the market, some more challenging than others, but you know, you want to start with simple and then develop as you go. The practice tests are people who have studied the exam and are creating their own options for practice based on the exam. When you study the past papers, you are studying exams. So it's not a matter of this is the closest to the exam or, the exam questions are like this. When you study the past papers, you're studying actual exam questions. So it's not a matter of, the the questions will come like this. This is the question that came. So this is how they are written. And so with comprehension, that is where you really need to begin. And so with nonfiction, sorry, I'll tell you which papers have the nonfiction, because this is the first part of the comprehension section. So after you do task one, which is spelling, task two, which is punctuation, task three, which is the grammar, then you go to section two and you begin task four. Task four is usually a passage with questions, and you have the opportunity to encounter either fiction or nonfiction. And so last week we looked at the fiction. This week we're looking at the nonfiction. So for nonfiction, you want to get your hands on the, go back, I believe 2020. Right, 2019 actually is nonfiction. 2021 nonfiction, and 2022 nonfiction. Right, so let me put that up. So um, yearly past papers, nonfiction texts, that would be 2019, 2021, and 2022. Yeah. So those are the ones you want to study if you're studying the nonfiction texts. So you have three to work with. So 2020 and 2023, those are fiction. We spoke about that last week, so you can get a copy of that. If you don't already have a copy of the blank exams, you can get a copy from my website. They're all together just for you to download. I'm going to put the link up in a little bit. Um, of course, there's no cost attached to that because this isn't my property that I could sell you, right? So these are free to download. I just group them in the places in one place so that you can have all of them and be able to really review. So what you're going to check, like I said, so we have 2019. Let me just show you one more time, right? 2019, 2021, and 2022, those are the three that used nonfiction text for that task four, right? And so those are the ones that you're studying. And if you don't already have a copy, you can go to this link, wordcoach.com/SEA-ELA-past-papers. The backslash, if you don't have it, you will still get it, but you can add it in, right? If you go to that link, you would get the ELA past papers from 2019 to 2023, the blank ones, and you would also get the creative writing from 2019 to 2023, so that you could really study. So as I showed you today, we were looking at 2019 and 2022, which were reports, if you really want to study how those questions come. So that means the other three, 2020, 2021, and 2023 were narratives. So you can get a copy of those and really study them. And that is going to help you a lot. So we have those three exams to work with when it comes to the nonfiction. And there are a couple of things that we really want to notice with the nonfiction, right? So we're looking at the whew, I don't know what's happening with my voice. Oh, yes, I do know. I went to bed kind of, I was going to say late, but it was more early than late. So really early today and not late last night. Yeah. Yeah. So you want to look at a couple of things, right? So I'm going to put them. So I would say pay attention to these three things when you're looking at the nonfiction passage, right? It's something that you look at overall with the others, but it's slightly different within nonfiction. And so this is where you would see some differences and be able to kind of guide your child or students. And so the first thing is you want to look at the order of the questions, right? The questions generally come in a particular order. And when I say that, what I mean is that the first question is not likely to be, what do you think? those kind of inferential extended questions. The first question is not likely to be that. The first question is likely to be a detail. And and details ask you questions like give features, where things can be found, identify names and lists and those kinds of things. Yeah. So that's what you would really kind of get first. So you look at the order of the questions. And as you look at the order of the questions, you would notice something that, okay, so they gradually build. And with the nonfiction, the kinds of details that you're asked, things like physical features and, reasons. So there are like specific details that you could find within paragraphs. And the most awesome news is that for many of them, they tell you where to look as well. At least one of the first three questions will tell you go to paragraph 3, go to paragraph 1, line this or line that. They tell you where to go. So this is what you want to get students to recognize. Pay attention to the question. So I always tell students, read the title, read your first paragraph, and then go to your questions. Because I've said this on this live before, I think was probably even last week. Um, you're getting 7 questions. 7 questions is not going to be all the questions that could be thought up for this passage. So you're not being asked everything. You're only being asked 7 specific things. And if you're asked 7 specific things, why are you trying to understand everything only to answer 7 specific things? That's going to take up your time. It's going to frustrate students, especially students who have challenges reading and different issues that may cause that. It's going to frustrate them, and you don't want the student to be frustrated during the exam. So what do? We teach them these exam strategies. Now these are not comprehension strategies when you're working through a comprehension in class to understand what you're reading. This is a comprehension exam strategy to help you get the most marks in the exam. Right? So I'm making it clear because I'm not advocating that you don't ever try to understand a passage. What I am saying is that this is an exam and treat it that way. Outside of exam prep, do all your comprehension things to make sure your child is reading well. Have them read often and read a variety of materials, not just books, magazine articles, newspaper articles, blogs, labels, signs, everything. Have them reading multiple things. For the exam, head to the questions. And so we start with that order of the questions, right? And then so the second thing is that I want you to pay attention to how the questions are worded, right? So how do I put, I'll just put wording of questions. So pay attention to how the questions are worded. And so now you're looking at the format, right? So give 2 reasons, state 2 physical features. According to passage 1, to paragraph 1, explain the meaning, state 2 ways. So we really want students to recognize the way questions are answered so that they're kind of like analyzing the questions to know how to answer and what is actually required of them. And so you're going through that and you're discussing it with your child or your students what the question is really asking for. And then from that, you look at how much space is given and how you would respond to those kinds of questions, right? And so the third thing is that you are reviewing and practicing responses. So I'm just going to put review and practice responses. Right? And so that's the third thing that you want to really pay attention to with the nonfiction. So we're starting with order of the questions, then we're looking at how the questions are worded, and then we're looking at review and practice how are responses presented? Why is one response better than another? And so if you want to um, get, because I have the series from 2019 to 2023, I have the answers for those. And what I did was to also group them so you can study nonfiction, comprehension, and the fiction, because you see the passages together by themselves, and then you could sort of look at them and see similarities and differences between fiction. Then you can study poetry by itself and you can study the graphic by itself. I've also grouped the ELA section so you can do spelling by itself, grammar by itself, and the punctuation by itself. And what I'm sharing with you here, these are exam strategies because you want to see what kinds of questions recur. So just as we looked at with the reports, there are some recurring themes that we could really tap into to make life easy on ourselves as we prepare. With the questions in the comprehension, there are some recurring themes as well. So, what I do with my students in my comprehension class, we study the questions and we look at possible responses, which ones work. We look at how the questions are phrased, what exactly is being required here, and what is unique about nonfiction, what is unique about fiction. What questions will you get in nonfiction that you would not get in another type of passage? So we go into all those kinds of details and we practice them, and we practice things in a slightly different way because I believe, okay, if a child is doing comprehension lessons, that means that they're having some challenges with comprehension. So we don't want to do more of what is being done at school because that is filling in a certain requirement, but the child is missing something. So then we do things a little bit differently so that we can fill in what's missing and then you get a complete version. So that's what we do. We really do explore and go into detail, and then we practice, and students get their feedback so they know, okay, yeah, they answer the questions properly, they understand how the questions are asked, and those kinds of things. And through this kind of systematic approach, you would gradually start seeing improvement in the comprehension because now students will understand how questions are asked, how to respond, and they would be able to maximize their time by going to the questions first, as well as being able to give their best responses. And so, with practice, they would get better and better where that is concerned. So, and of course, if you want to get a copy of those answers, so this is ELA past papers 2019 to 2023. The cost of that is 150. So you get um all five exams answers complete plus sorted into sections, and each one comes with answers. When I say answers, I mean like explanations. So I don't just give you the answer and say, well, okay, the answer for this question is this. There's a little explanation that says why that answer works and possible alternatives that might not work as well. I did that for some of them, not all of them, but I did go through to make it as explanatory as possible. So if you're interested in something like that, you could send me a WhatsApp. The cost is 150, like I said. If you're interested, send me a WhatsApp, send me a message on Messenger, on Facebook, and I would reply as quickly as I can. Um, Forgive me if I don't answer immediately, same day, but I try to answer at least by the next day once I see, once I see a comment or question. I think there are like two people I have to respond to still. Um, so bear with me. I'll get you your responses this week and send out the information. All right. But 717-4993, that's my number. And you can also WhatsApp me with questions. So if you're going through anything, it doesn't have to be my papers or anything like that. WhatsApp me with a question, because once I know the kinds of questions that you have and the kinds of challenges that you have, I'll be able to answer them in I'll answer you as best as I can right away, and I'll try to include some of those responses in either a Facebook post, an essay piece filled, or during the live, so that other people, because some people might have the courage to ask a question that everybody has and don't know how to answer, how to ask your questions, and I'll answer them as best as I can. So I think that is about it for today. So you have, so with these comprehension, we're dealing with nonfiction this week, and we're working with the same 30 minutes, 1 hour, right? So what you're doing is you're studying the questions on one day, the order of the questions, how the questions are written, and so on. The next day, you're looking at the answers and practicing, different kinds of answers and seeing what works and what doesn't work. And then on your third day, you're doing a full ELA practice test with everything timed as well, implementing what you learned about the nonfiction. So you need a nonfiction passage to work with the practice test, right? And so that's the breakdown for your practice this week. And so that should help you work things out. So um I think, yeah, that's it. Now, I focus on the creative writing and the comprehension. For those of you who need a little extra help with the ELA and with the math, you can check out Giselle Russell Clark. She is the other admin of SEA, the Peaceful Approach. She has some really awesome, the math papers where she grouped according to topics and all those kinds of things. I leave the math to her because she's pretty awesome at it. And math, I'm working on something for worded problems. But otherwise, yeah, the math is all Miss Giselle, right? She's pretty passionate about it too. I don't know. I admire people who could be passionate about math, but then I guess people would look at me being passionate about teaching creative writing and thinking, huh, so yeah, to each his own. So if you want to have it covered, comprehension, creative writing, I have some stuff that you could work with. If you're looking for math, check Miss Giselle. She'd be able to help you. So just go to SEA Peaceful Approach and you could find her there, send her a message. She has lots of posts in there. Her number is up. I don't recall her number right now, but yeah, you can find her in SEA Peaceful. All right, so that is it for us today. Thank you for those of you who were able to stick around to the end. I hope it's been helpful. Please let me know. And I know it might sound kind of strange, but even though I know what I'm sharing is useful, hearing someone say it outside of my own head is very comforting, and it reinforces that, yeah, I'm doing something good. So I don't mind. Yeah, I'm asking. Tell me that it's it works, so that, so the little negative voice in my head doesn't start chiming in. Yeah, help me out with that one. So give me a comment. For those of you who have the worksheets, let me know. Are they, what is useful? Because I'd love to know exactly what parts of it work so that I can tell other people, hey, I know I created it and everything works like this, but people who are using it say this about it. So yeah, so definitely let me know so that I can share it with others too. Okay, so yeah, I've been saying we're wrapping up for like about 5 minutes now, but real Trini, right? So we have to say we're going to wrap up, talk about wrapping up, and then mention that we're finally wrapping up before we actually wrap up, right? So I do hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of today. Like I said, this morning I got that wonderful news from the parent of how, you know, it's the worksheets are amazing for her and it's helping her daughter. So my day is set. And then I got to share with you as well. So yeah, my day is set. I hope you have a wonderful day as much as I am having. And I look forward to seeing you next week. So feel free to check in the meantime. Take care, everybody. Bye bye.